Being separated from the people you care about is the most frustrating thing in the world. What I'm trying to say is that serving time in prison is as awful as it sounds, so don't believe any lies and abstain from crime. Here is a list of the top 10 people who outlived insane prison sentences. Starting from number 10, Clarence Marshall at 64 years and 70 days. The prisoner who had been in Michigan the longest is Clarence Marshall. The poor man was sentenced in 1950, and just recently in 2015, he was released on one count of armed robbery and another of unarmed assault with the intent to rob and steal. Clarence received a life sentence. 64 years later, in 2015, he was recently granted parole. Clarence was 84 years old at the time of his parole because he was born on May 18, 1930. Number 9. Warren Nutter at 66 years and still ongoing. Warren is the youngest person to have ever been given the death penalty in Iowa. When he was sentenced for the murder of a patrolman during an unsuccessful gas station robbery, he was only 18 years old. In the maximum security facility known as the Fort, the Iowa State Penitentiary, Warren Jack Nutter has been a guest of the state since 1956. He is the 5th longest-serving prisoner in American history and the longest-serving inmate in Iowa. Nutter's case sparked newspaper editorials opposing the death penalty because of his youth at the time of the crime, which later fueled a movement that resulted in the death penalty being abolished in Iowa 9 years later. Number 8. Walter H. Bork Jr. at 66 years and still ongoing. Walter Bork Jr. is the prisoner in New Hampshire with the longest sentence. Walter began his new life in prison in 1956 and has since turned 68 calendars. He is anticipated to serve 99 years and 6 months in prison for the axe murder of Patricia Johnson, a 4-year-old girl, when he was only 17 years old. He will be released by June 11, 2054 at the latest. Number 7. William Hirons at 65 years and 181 days. Born on November 15, 1928, William George Hirons was an American murderer who confessed to 3 killings in 1946. Because of the infamous messages he left at his crime scenes using lipsticks, he is infamously known as the Lipstick Killer. When William passed away on March 5, 2012, he had spent 65 years in a prison environment. Number 6. Johnson Van Dyke Grigsby at 66 years and 123 days. Johnson was given a life sentence for murder after killing a man in a bar brawl. He was denied parole an astounding 69 times before being freed at the age of 89. Unbelievably, Johnson returned to prison on his own initiative after having trouble finding work in 1976. Johnson stated in the same year that the thought of his sentence was cruel and that there were times where he wished the judge had given him a hanging verdict. But he later added, "I've put all my trust in God. There must be a purpose to this." Number 5. Joseph Ligon at 70 years and ongoing. In American history, Joseph Ligon is the oldest juvenile lifer. Ligon was given a mandatory life without parole sentence for murder at the young age of 15. He was traveling through South Philadelphia with 5 friends while under the influence of 2 bottles of wine when the group decided to carry out a string of robberies that left 8 men stabbed, including 2 who died as a result of their wounds. The 2016 offer of resentencing and parole was initially rejected by Ligon. However, he received a new sentence in 2017 and became qualified for parole. Surprisingly, he rejected the offer once more in the hopes of winning an appeal. Ligon claims that he should be released after serving his original sentence and given a new one so that he can completely cut ties with the legal system. The first day of Ligon's sentence was December 18, 1953. Number 4. John Phillips at 70 years and ongoing. Since 1991, John has served more time in jail or prison than any other person. He was found guilty of raping a 5-year-old girl on July 17, 1952, and has been in prison for 68 years. John committed the heinous crime when he was just 18 years old and only a 9th grader. The report that was produced after John underwent a medical examination reportedly labeled him a moron. and stated that he had the mental capacity of a child around the age of 7 months. His attorneys entered a guilty plea, and the judge then gave him a life sentence. Number 3. Paul Geidel Jr. at 68 years. The longest-serving prisoner in American history, Paul Geidel Jr., was released on parole after serving his entire sentence on April 21, 1894. When John was only 17 years old, he was found guilty of second-degree murder. He would proceed to serve 68 years and 296 days in different state prisons in New York. At the ripe age of 86, John was released on May 7, 1980. A few years later, on May 1, 1987, he passed away. Number 2. Francis Clifford Smith, at 68 years and ongoing. The oldest prisoner in Connecticut is by far Francis. On June 7, 1959, he received a death sentence for the 1949 robbery and murder of a night watchman at a yacht club. Just 2 hours before he was supposed to be put to death, his sentence was changed in 1954 to life in prison. And finally, at number 1, we have Charles Fossard at 70 years and 303 days. Charles Fossard, an Australian bad boy, is the most incarcerated person in history and the first non-American on the list. If a felon commits a serious crime while still a minor, combined with a mental illness, you have the makings of an exceptionally lengthy sentence. That is unquestionably the case for the prisoner who appears to have served the longest sentence in history. On June 28, 1903, a French immigrant to Australia named Charles Fossard killed a man in Skye, south of Melbourne. Fossard, who was 21 at the time, was located, questioned, determined to be insane, and then imprisoned on August 21st of that same year. He was committed to Melbourne's Ararat Lunatic Asylum, where he resided until his passing on June 19th, 1974 at the age of 92. So that's the end of the video. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and press the notification bell so you never miss out on our next videos. Until the next video, take care.